Malice at the Palace is remembered as one of the most chaotic and impactful episodes in NBA history. It was a massive brawl that took place on November 19, 2004, during a regular season game between the Indiana Pacers and the Detroit Pistons at the now-defunct Palace of Auburn Hills. Although it was merely an early-season matchup, the context and aftermath of this altercation made it a pivotal event that continues to echo throughout professional basketball, influencing how the league handles violence and security issues. At the time, the 2004-2005 season had just started. The Detroit Pistons were coming off a surprising 2004 championship win after defeating the Los Angeles Lakers, led by Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant, in the finals. With Chauncey Billups, Ben Wallace, Rasheed Wallace, Tayshaun Prince, and Richard Hamilton, the Pistons prided themselves on a stifling defense and a team-first style of play. Meanwhile, the Indiana Pacers were widely considered a promising Eastern Conference contender, featuring Jermaine O'Neal, Ron Artest, Stephen Jackson, and veteran Reggie Miller. However, Miller was sidelined by injury and not playing that night. The team's head coach, Rick Carlisle, had previously coached the Pistons, giving him particular familiarity with Detroit. Adding to the tension was the memory of the previous season's Eastern Conference Finals, where the Pistons had beaten the Pacers on their way to the title. Thus, that night of November 19th carried an atmosphere of revenge, despite being only a regular season game. The mood on the court was tense from the opening tip, with heavy contact and constant trash talk. The Pacers grabbed a significant lead, clearly dominating that evening. As the clock wound down in the fourth quarter, it became obvious the Pistons were unlikely to come back. With less than a minute to go, Indiana was leading by double digits. Normally, teams would simply run out the clock in such a scenario, avoiding unnecessary physicality. However, emotions were running high, especially for Ron Artest, who was known for playing intense defense until the final buzzer and celebrating his plays in a way that sometimes rubbed opponents and fans the wrong way. Then came the spark that set everything ablaze. Ben Wallace received a pass near the basket and attempted a layup, only to be fouled relatively hard by Artest, an unusually forceful foul given the game was essentially decided. Feeling frustrated, Wallace responded by shoving Artest in the face, igniting what at first looked like a typical NBA scuffle, with shoving, shouting, and teammates or referees trying to separate everyone. But this time, the spark turned into an all-out firestorm. In a move that seemed part provocation, part attempt to calm himself, Ron Artest lay down on the scorer's table beside the court while the rest of the players tried to keep Ben Wallace at bay and defuse tension. The Pistons crowd began booing and heckling, and at some point, an irate fan threw a cup of liquid that hit Artest in the chest and splashed his face. Infuriated, he leaped to his feet and charged into the stands in search of the person responsible. Stephen Jackson followed him to offer backup, concerned that Artest might be surrounded by hostile fans. In seconds, cameras worldwide were capturing the surreal image of NBA players climbing into the stands to confront spectators. The Palace of Auburn Hills was soon plunged into chaos. Ron Artest, adrenaline pumping, ended up attacking a bystander who, as it turned out later, was not even the one who threw the cup. Meanwhile, Stephen Jackson threw punches at another fan, and several Pacers, like Jermaine O'Neal, partially made their way into the crowd in an effort to separate teammates or defend themselves, only to compound the chaos. Some enraged Detroit supporters hurled bottles, cups, and popcorn at the players. Security and police on site were unprepared for such a large-scale outbreak of violence. Fans were fleeing or screaming, while others used their phones and cameras to record what was happening. Some even tried to get closer to the brawl. Among the most iconic images was Jermaine O'Neal delivering a sliding punch to a fan who had run onto the court, narrowly missing a more serious blow when he slipped on the floor. The game was officially stopped. There was no way to continue. The Pacers desperately attempted to retreat to the locker room, dodging thrown objects. A handful of furious fans approached the tunnel leading off the court, and it was only when more police officers intervened that the Pacers were finally escorted out safely. But the damage was done, and the footage was broadcast live across the country and even internationally. By the next day, headlines blared "Malice at the Palace" and "Basketball," highlighting the shocking nature of professional athletes fighting with fans. The media questioned whether this revealed deeper issues: insufficient security, a culture of mutual provocation between players and spectators, or perhaps racial and social tensions underlying pro sports. Then NBA Commissioner David Stern soon appeared in public, stating that such behavior was unacceptable and that the league would respond with severe punishment. Investigations by the NBA, in conjunction with local police and the Pistons management, identified numerous fans who had gone beyond merely insulting the players. Some had physically rushed onto the floor or hurled projectiles. Those individuals faced lifetime bans from Pistons games or legal charges for assault. Stern, for his part, doled out historical suspensions to the players. Ron Artest was suspended for the remainder of the season, 86 games in total, the harshest penalty ever given for an incident that did not involve drugs or gambling. Steven Jackson was suspended for 30 games, Jermaine O'Neal for 25, later reduced to 15, and Ben Wallace, who had started the altercation on the court, received a 6-game ban. Several other players received shorter suspension. The financial losses reached into the millions, as those suspended forfeited their salaries during that time. The repercussions proved devastating for the Indiana Pacers, who had harbored legitimate championship hopes after reaching the conference finals the previous year. Deprived of Artest, Jackson, and O'Neal for a significant portion of the season, their competitive edge evaporated. Reggie Miller, in his final year before retirement, saw his last chance at an NBA title slip away amid chaos. Ron Artest, who had been viewed as one of the league's top perimeter defenders, was irreversibly branded as a troublemaker and did not regain a semblance of a positive reputation until years later, when he changed his name to Metta World Peace and won a championship with the 2010 Los Angeles Lakers alongside Kobe Bryant. Steven Jackson likewise earned the stigma of a brawler, though he still enjoyed some strong seasons elsewhere. Jermaine O'Neal, meanwhile, was hampered by injuries and never fully returned to top form, while the Pacers, once so full of promise, were unable to climb back to elite status. For the NBA itself, the Malice at the Palace was a watershed moment. Under David Stern's leadership, the league tightened its rules on player conduct, security measures, and disciplinary protocols. Among the most conspicuous changes was the introduction of a dress code requiring players to dress more formally off the court, an attempt, albeit controversial, at projecting a cleaner public image and distancing players from hip-hop culture stereotypes. Security near the court was increased, alcohol sales were further restricted, and the NBA adopted a zero-tolerance policy toward court invasions or violent altercation. This stance was partly a response to alarmed sponsors and concerned fans who saw the brawl as a sign that the league was losing control. Culturally, the event provoked debates over the extent to which fans can express their passion by insulting or goading athletes. Some argued that high-paid professionals must keep calm in any situation, while others insisted that spectators should never cross the line of throwing objects or engaging in physical attacks. These questions touched on broader topics, including racial stereotypes and the sometimes fragile boundary separating sports from raw emotion. The lasting significance of the Malice at the Palace remains clear, even nearly 2 decades later. Its images and repercussions are regularly referenced in interviews and documentaries, most notably in Netflix's Untold, Malice at the Palace, which includes first-hand accounts by players, security personnel, and fans, each sharing their perspective. The episode laid bare the lack of preparation for a large-scale outbreak of violence and drove the league to institute more robust security measures, ensuring that future confrontations would be contained before spiraling out of control. On the court, the Pacers were never the same after losing key pieces. The Pistons continued to contend, but found their 2004 triumph overshadowed by the label of a franchise whose home court had hosted the most infamous brawl in modern basketball history. The players involved, particularly Ron Artest and Steven Jackson, became symbols of instability in the eyes of many. Only with time did some of them manage to rehabilitate their reputation, sharing their remorse and revealing the emotional burdens they had carried. Despite the negative fallout, some analysts contend that the Malice at the Palace forced the NBA to improve in the long run by solidifying its discipline measures. David Stern repeatedly emphasized that the harsh penalties were meant to safeguard the league's image. A short-term PR nightmare, the incident nonetheless proved an impetus for broad reforms in how the NBA handles security, marketing, and its players' relationship with the public. Beneath all the chaos and aggression, it is worth remembering that these athletes were young men under tremendous pressure, and many of the involved fans later regretted their behavior. Yet the public's lasting impression is of those shocking scenes: Ron Artest lying on the scorer's table, being pelted with a flying cup, Steven Jackson lunging into the stands, fists raised, Jermaine O'Neal delivering a sliding punch to a fan on the court. It was a stark reminder that despite the professionalism of the sport, primal fury can erupt when pride, rivalry, and a lack of emotional control converge. Even now, when smaller skirmishes break out on the court, they're inevitably compared to the Malice at the Palace. Since then, although scuffles occur occasionally, nothing has approached the scale or gravity of that night. Many regard it as the NBA's darkest moment. Others see it as a dire warning that set clearer boundaries between players and fans, underscoring the principle that sports, for all its passion, must uphold safety above all. All these years later, the Malice at the Palace remains vivid in people's mind. From the staggering suspensions and colossal fines to the fundamental shifts in how the NBA polices its arenas, November 19, 2004, became a pivotal date that, literally, changed the rules of the game. Today, anyone attending an NBA arena sees well-defined guidelines on what happens if a fan crosses the line or if a player loses composure. The starting point for those transformations was that fateful night when basketball gave way to chaos, reminding everyone that, No matter how professional, the sport is not immune to outbursts of anger when fierce rivalries and unleashed tempers meet a lack of restraint.